part of what I think CaPRI can help us to do is to just distill some of those things and to see how we translate the policy into programs and how we ensure that the quality of the process and the content of the process allows us to take the situation forward. The other thing is that I think we have to sell again to the country why we have to transform the system. And I'm not saying that there is no acknowledgement that this is needed, but I think we need to get it back in our heads, because we talk about the vagueness of goals in education, but you see, it is a lot of things that are bundled together when we talk about the outcome of education. It is talking about that citizen who is adaptable, that citizen who can live with other people, that citizen who can learn to be and learn to do, but also that citizen who can do math and who can speak English. So there are all kinds of goals that are a part of what we're looking for in terms of the product of the education system. And so we need to get that conversation going again. When the task force was set up, it was because there was an outcry from the country. You know, we were on the cusp of just concluding a general election, in which, as usual, education is a main point. But the main point of that discussion was who was going to pay. And of course the answer was nobody but the government. So when it was realized that we would still have to charge, we then had to look at the question of what are we paying for? And it is out of that, together with discussions about the CSME and the fact that you're going to have almost one job market, a regional market, and therefore people had to be able to move from one to the other. You needed certain qualifications to be able to do that. It also came out of the fact that, you know, we're talking about foreign direct investment, and therefore we had to look at how competitive we were with some of our neighbors otherwise. It was that discussion that led to people now taking on the thing that, yeah, our children are in school, but that's about it. Some of them are just in school, and some of them are not even in school. Let us now talk about other things. Let us talk about what are they getting when they are in school. I think we have to return to some of those salient areas, because, believe me, if you follow some of the public discussion, education is really not a priority. Right? You can earn far more by being stupid, right? And I think we have to look at the whole issue of making sure that people understand that education is a value in itself, right? It's a value in itself, and the discussion has to then be revisited about why the education system and the output is so important. The key recommendations from the task force report spoke about the new model of governance. The minister has spoken about it. It spoke about the moving of the decisions from the level of the ministry to the level of the school. And in that regard, we had actually started doing performance evaluation of teachers and of principals. And yes, it was burdensome, but the schools that used it, I mean, I remember having a long conversation with Mr. Radley Reed, and he spoke to me about how he used both CSEC results and the evaluation of the teachers to actually do work plans for the school. The schools that use those instruments are the ones that are able to get certainly know what it is that the teachers are working towards, and the students are working towards, and the parents, because parents are called in and they are told what is expected of their children. We have to get rid of this this culture of low expectation. Instilling the culture of accountability is one thing, but there's a culture of low expectation where we almost say to some of our children, if you get 50% is okay, right? We have to rank up the order a little bit and tell our children, hey, even if you're good at music, there's a way in which you use music to enter the education system to perform excellently. Let me just give you an example. There's a school in St. James which was really the lowest performing school, called St. James High School. And we got members of the diaspora to come together as a team, and Temple University, one of our Jamaicans, was the head of the School of Education there, and they came in and they taught the teachers how to do work plans, they taught the teachers how to do assessments, etc. But the core of their transformation was a music band. And the music band became the pride of the school. They eventually went to Philadelphia and performed, but music was used as an entry point into other things, reading, mathematics, those kinds of things. And they went to Philadelphia, they performed, they got a standing ovation. Do you know that for the first time, and it sounds as if that school actually had 40% of their students getting more than 5 CXC passes? And it all comes out of a pride and the use of music as the entry point into getting those children to be interested in learning. So a part of it is that as we look at school-based development and the leadership at that level, we have to talk about how we use the students' interests and how we use diverse methods of teaching. Because everybody believes that, you know, you stand up and you talk to them, they hear. We have already also learned that in terms of males, the computer is the entry point, right? Schools have experimented with things like the school in Polyground, where they separate the girls from the boys, and they only see each other when they play, because they say that at that age, girls are a little bit too exuberant for the boys, and the boys get a little bashful and don't answer as much. So what I'm saying is that we have things at the school-based level where we can look at them and see how they have worked. There is a training of principals which is taking place, and of course there are issues relating to the Teachers Council and how we're going to use that to professionalize the profession. And if I were a teacher, I would embrace the concept of a Jamaican Teaching Council, which would put me on the level of the General Legal Council and the Medical Council and all those other things, so that I am a recognized profession. And I'd also like to say to our teachers that we're not going to get the best in the profession if you keep talking down the profession. Talk up the profession. Talk about what a wonderful opportunity it is to contribute. Talk about the assets of teaching, the virtues of teaching, and the things that you need. My two final points would be this. One is, you know, in this thing about accountability, there are two mantras that I think pervade the system too much. Accountability for everybody else, but not for me. So I want to talk about how the permanent secretary is to be accountable, and I want to talk about how the other person is to be accountable. When it comes to me, I really don't want to talk about it. Everybody in the system has to accept a level of accountability, that the system is not going to perform unless at all levels you give the permanent secretary a contract for performance, but the education officer, or whatever you're going to call them, the inspectors, must also have a contract for accountability. And the other is, this other mantra is, this too will pass. So every time that there is an attempt at transformation, I say, it's all right, we will live it out. In fact, an officer at the ministry actually told me, she said, you know, the thing I noticed, that I have been here after many ministers. So in other words, you can't get me out, right? So there's the view, this too will pass. How do you get people to the sense that this is not about the minister or the political administration, but it's about their country? It's about a system that everybody has to be a part of, right? And if you're a professional, a very important part of it. And my final point has to do with the question of financing and funding. It is not something that we can pass over in a very cursory way. It is something that CaPRI and others, we have to sit down and look at how we're going to fund the system. There are many issues, including the question of Windows 1, 2, 3. When the time comes now for the government to provide the counterpart funding to get that done, it doesn't get done. And so the literacy program is held behind, you know, it falls behind. The whole question of interventions, we know what needs to be done. We know that you have to have the competency shelters. We know you have to have the specialists, but you can't get the extra personnel because the establishment has to remain at a certain level.